My name's Matt Grenier. I was the scenic designer for SUNY Oneonta's fall 2021 production of The Revolutionists. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of the process that I used to arrive at the design that you see in the rendering on screen. The role of the set designer is to create a visually interesting and practical physical environment for the actors and the director to effectively tell the story. So my process very much started in an analysis of the story. I read the script several times and took detailed notes about what the story was about, who the characters were, where it was either implied or explicitly stated that scenes were taking place, as well as important themes and concepts and sort of emotions being conveyed in the text that might inform the visual decisions. The other thing I did right at the beginning of the process was to do a lot of research. The entire design process is very much a process of building confidence in the decisions that you're making and how they are serving the story. So I did a lot of research on Paris and the French Revolution to educate myself on what the physical environments might look like. What do interior spaces at salons look like? What kind of furniture? What kind of ornamentation and decorations, and what kind of surface treatments would be in use, both interior and exterior? What did the outsides of buildings look like? What did the guillotine look like, and how was it actually used? I also did research on different kind of conceptual or graphical stylings of the guillotines. It's important to do research both for historical context, but also for to kind of explore how things should feel, like what kind of style and tone they should have. From the script analysis and the research, I composed sort of some reflections and inspirations, as well as a list of general requirements for the scenery and a lot of questions that I had about the scenery and how we wanted to approach the show. So when we went into our design meetings, this is some of what we were discussing as a production team. The other thing I did in preparation was to do some conceptual exploration. So I did a lot of sketches kind of playing with different ways that, for example, the guillotine could be incorporated into the visual design as a motif, like in the architecture or the decoration, looking at different ways that the guillotine might be depicted in sort of more abstract or more realistic ways, how the main character's space would be laid out, how to convey interior versus exterior space, how to provide maybe different levels for the actors to be on, to establish a scaffolding for the executions to take place on. Just lots of kind of quick rough sketches that we could use as a point of discussion to move further into the design. This sketch here is one that the director particularly liked, this kind of skewed frame and blade. It reminded her of brutalist architecture. So this is what we chose to pursue in further detail. So I started playing with that idea a little bit more, looking at different shapes of the guillotine and how the platforming might be arranged underneath it. What it might look like if we put writing on the blade or on the background behind the guillotine. I did further research on brutalist architecture and kind of pulled in different ideas into the rest of the scenery beyond just the shape of the guillotine itself. This is a color rendering that I did as we were kind of narrowing in on certain decisions. For example, we really went with this brutalist architecture in the shapes of things, creating these harsh forms that had some weight to them, but also kind of trying to make it feel like it was still a scaffolding that had been temporarily set up in order to, for executions to take place. We also were talking about color palette a lot, and we were deciding that the scenery itself would be rather neutral in color tone so that the colors of the costumes would really pop. We had also decided that the costumes were going to include a motif of handwriting, of text on the fabrics, relating to the main character's role as a writer and how she's writing the play within the play. So we were looking at ways to bring that handwriting motif into the scenery as well, and I really liked the idea of bringing that into sort of a soft burlap skirting underneath the platforms. The entire design process is a process of narrowing your focus and increasing the level of detail. So at this point I really had to figure out the specifics of how to implement them in our theater. So I started working in a computer program called Vectorworks in 3D. That's what I was most comfortable with to kind of quickly explore different ideas as far as how big should the guillotine blade be, how skewed should the frame be, what different levels of platforming should we have, where should the door be located, all those kinds of specific details. I found it easiest to work in 3D in the computer in order to kind of settle on all of that, because I particularly like the way that you can move around in the 3D space and look at the scenery from different kind of photorealistic vantage points in the audience in order to see, does the design look good from multiple vantage points as opposed to kind of one common place in the audience. And also, it allows you to walk through the space, as if you were an actor. So I can see, if an actor is standing in a particular place, what are they able to see, as of the rest of the scenery? Are they able to look across the set and see an actor on the other side, and so forth? So this is the tool that I felt most comfortable using in order to sort of arrive at all of the specific details of the stairs and the platforming and the support structures and the geometry and all of these things. The kind of final stage in the preparation of the design is the production of drawings in order to build and paint the scenery. So that process started with what's called the ground plan. This is the ground plan of the set. It shows the platforming and all the stairs and everything from a top-down view, so you can see how they're located in the theater, where they're located, how high they are, their relationship to the steel structures overhead in the theater. So we could plan out things like how to hang the guillotine blade from the ceiling. From the ground plan, I moved on to detailed drawings of the different components of the scenery. So this is the detailed drawing of the guillotine elements, including the blade structure and the posts and the beam. This is some of the other platform details, the custom platform of the scaffolding and how to build it. Some of the skirting details, the other platforms here. The last drawing that I created is what would commonly be called a paint elevation. So this is a drawing that the scenic designer uses to communicate to all of the painters on the show how the scenery should be painted. The way I prepared this drawing was I prepared these individual textures in Photoshop and then imported them back into Vectorworks so I could see how they all looked together in sort of a photorealistic way. So like the shape of the guillotine was exported to Photoshop. I painted it in Photoshop, using the brushes and kind of mimicking the way it would really be painted, and then brought it back into the 3D model. So from this final rendering here, let's now have a look at the finished scenery. And I think the fact that it looks anything like the rendering is a sign of success, that we were actually able to build and paint what was designed. It was possible for us to achieve it in the time that we had using the resources that we had. I think it ultimately served the show quite well. It gave the director a lot of options in terms of how to block the actors, how to utilize the platforms in different ways. It certainly created a challenge for our lighting designer, Scott Seeger, but he did a pretty awesome job working with the giant guillotine blade obstacle that was placed up in the way of a lot of the lighting equipment. And the costumes, really, popped very, very nicely against that neutral toned set, and I really am happy with the way the connection between the text in the costumes, kind of worked out with the text on the scenery as well. The last thing that I'll leave you with is I don't want to leave you with the impression that this whole process was like design everything and then implement it, and nothing really changes along the way. Few shows work that way. It is a sequential process, but especially with such a compressed schedule on the show, there's a lot of overlapping going on. Different aspects of the design are further along than others, and it is also an iterative process. There are times where you're having to go back and change something because of resource issues or something is just not serving the story well, whatever it is. On this show, we were intending to bring on an actual bathtub for the assassination of Marat, and we ultimately decided to cut that from the show. The further along you are in the process, the harder it is to make big changes, but it is done, and it sometimes it just has to be done along the way. The process is also iterative because, as I said at the beginning, it is very much a confidence building process, the process of designing, and there are times along the way where you may, as a designer, lose confidence in some aspect of what you're doing. I call it the I hate everything phase. You get to a point on some aspect of it where it doesn't look right. You don't like the way it looks. It's not serving what you thought it was going to. It, whatever it is, something isn't going right, and in those moments it always helps to go back to the research, go back to the script, go back to what the original intent is, and if you've done your due diligence back in that early process, then you can find answers there, and you can sort of regain the confidence and ultimately arrive at the best decision that you can and keep things moving. So that is the scenic design for the Revolutionists, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email and be happy to answer any questions or discuss any aspect of the process further.